Black CEO told to wait outside 5 minutes later. She exposed HR bias and fired management. Hello everyone, before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's get back to the story. Ma'am, you can't stand there. The voice wasn't polite. It wasn't confused. It was certain. The man in the navy suit stepped forward and physically shifted his body between her and the executive check-in desk arm, stretched slightly as if blocking a line of traffic.
Staff and catering wait outside, he said louder now.
Executives only. Heads turned. Not subtly. Openly. She stood there in a gray hoodie, black backpack, resting on one shoulder, paper coffee cup in hand. No badge clipped to her chest. No assistant trailing behind her. No signal of power. Just quiet presence. Behind the desk, a digital screen glowed GLOB, ALLA, a DARSHIPS, UMMITBOARDNEXE, CUTIVA, a CECESONLY. The man glanced at her shoes. Sneakers. Then back to her face. This is a restricted zone, he added, voice edged with impatience. You're holding up senior leadership? Senior leadership. The phrase echoed louder than it should have. She didn't move. Didn't apologize. Didn't explain. She simply looked at him. That was when he did it. He reached toward her badge, less hoodie pocket, as if expecting to find a credential, and when he found nothing, he let out a short laugh. Yeah, he muttered. That's what I thought. A nearby coordinator leaned toward him. Should I call security? Yes, he said immediately. We've had people sneak into events before.
Sneak in.
The word hung in the air like smoke. Two executives standing near the espresso bar stopped mid-sentence. A woman in a tailored cream coat slowly lifted her phone, pretending to check a message. The security officer at the far end of the terminal began walking toward them, posture rigid. Ma'am, the suited man said again, now with authority sharpened into accusation, step outside. Now. Not please. Now. The guard arrived. Is there a problem? He asked. She's refusing to leave a restricted executive event, the man replied smoothly. No credentials. No clearance. The guard turned to her. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to exit the terminal while we verify your status. Verify your status. There it was again. She looked at the glass wall beyond them. On the tarmac sat a sleek black jet company logo stamped across the tail in silver. She knew that aircraft. She approved its acquisition. 20 years ago, she stood outside a conference room because someone told her she didn't look like leadership. 20 years later, a different building. Same script. You're making this difficult, the man in the navy suit said, voice rising just enough for others to hear. This summit is for executives, not support staff. Support staff. This time, he didn't lower his voice. He wanted it heard. A few people shifted uncomfortably. No one intervened. The guard stepped closer. Ma'am, if you don't comply, we'll have to escort you out. Escort. Public removal. That's what he meant.
She finally spoke. Her voice was steady.
Measured. On what grounds? The man exhaled sharply. You don't belong here. Silence. Clean. Sharp. Absolutes.
Several phones were no longer pretending.
They were recording. The guard adjusted his grip on his radio. This is your final request, he said.
She slowly lowered her coffee cup into the nearest trash receptacle.
Not hurried. Not shaken. Deliberate. Then she reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out her phone. The man in the suit smirked. Go ahead, he said. Call whoever you need. She unlocked the screen, didn't look at him, and said quietly into the receiver legal, "Patch me through to compliance and initiate a full executive access audit." Now, the guard paused. The man's smirk didn't fade. Not yet. "You should have just waited outside," he said. She lifted her eyes to his. "You're absolutely certain," she asked calmly, "that I don't belong here, yes?" No hesitation. No doubt. 5 minutes. That's how long it would take to end his career. The terminal didn't erupt. It tightened. The kind of silence that hums just before something breaks. The man in the navy suit folded his arms confidence, settling back into his posture like nothing had shifted. "Compliance," he repeated with a faint chuckle. "This is a private summit." She didn't respond to him. She was listening. "Yes," she said calmly into the phone. "Timestamp this interaction. Include verbal denial of executive access and attempted removal." The guard's radio crackled softly at his shoulder. He glanced down. A flicker. Then he straightened again. "Ma'am," he said, "more cautiously now, if you could just step outside while we sort this out." She held up one finger. Not aggressively. Not dismissively. "Just wait." Across the lobby, a young analyst had stopped pretending to scroll his phone. He was staring at her face, brow furrowed. "I know her," he whispered under his breath. No one heard him. Not yet. The man in the suit shifted, irritation creeping back in. "You're causing a disruption," he said louder now, projecting to the small crowd forming behind retractable barriers. "This is exactly why we have protocols. Protocols. Policies. Barriers. Words that sound neutral until you watch who they're used against." Her phone buzzed softly against her ear. "Yes," she said. "Pull the executive roster for today's summit. Cross-reference access logs for the last 10 minutes. The guard's radio crackled again. This time it wasn't static. His expression changed.
Subtle.
But visible. "Copy that," a voice murmured through the earpiece. "Stand by." The suited man noticed. "What is it?" he asked sharply. The guard didn't answer. Instead, he looked at her again. Longer this time. Studying. The espresso machine hissed in the background. A rolling suitcase clicked across polished tile. Someone near the glass wall lowered their phone, slightly unsure whether to keep recording. "You really should have just waited outside," the man muttered, leaning closer to her. "This isn't going to end the way you think." She tilted her head slightly. "No," she agreed softly. "It won't." Her phone chimed. An email notification lit up the large digital display behind the check-in desk. It wasn't supposed to mirror internal alerts, but it did. AXEUTIVACCEEIAE. The receptionist froze. Another notification followed. COMPLIANCEREVIEWLAVLRED. The analyst across the room went pale. "Oh my God," he whispered. The guard's radio came alive again, this time clear and direct. "Security Unit 3, the voice said, firm and unmistakable. Do not remove the individual. Repeat, do not remove. Await further instruction from Executive Office." Executive Office. The suited man blinked. "What he said." The guard stepped back. Not dramatically, but decisively. He moved from in front of her to slightly behind her. The shift was small, but everyone saw it. The man in navy felt it too. His jaw tightened. "This is a misunderstanding," he said quickly, glancing toward the reception desk. "Check the list again." They already had. Her phone buzzed once more. She lowered it slowly, looked directly at him. "Would you like to see the roster?" she asked calmly, "or should I read it to you Somewhere near the glass wall, someone whispered, "Wait, is that her? The 5 minutes were almost up." The word spread before the truth did. Executive office. It moved through the terminal in a low ripple, subtle but unstoppable. The man in the navy suit straightened, smoothing the front of his jacket as if fabric alone could restore control. "There's been a mistake," he said sharply to the receptionist. "Run her name." The receptionist's fingers trembled slightly over the keyboard. "Sir, I run her name." The large screen behind the desk flickered again. Internal dashboards weren't meant for public view, but someone in IT had pushed access across the terminal monitors. Yeah. Board members, division presidents, global directors. The analyst across the lobby stepped closer, squinting at the screen. "There," he whispered. But the suited man was already reading ahead. The guard's earpiece crackled once more. Confirming identity, the voice said clearly, "Primary shareholder present on site." Repeat, "Primary shareholder present." Primary shareholder. The words didn't land softly. They hit. The suited man's face drained just slightly. "That's not possible," he said under his breath.
She watched him the way someone watches a clock tick down.
"Patient."
Certain.
The receptionist swallowed.
"Sir," she said carefully, eyes fixed on the glowing display.
The executive override is linked to her name appeared. Full. Undeniable. Position title flashing beside it. Chief Executive Officer.
Silence.
The espresso machine stopped mid-cycle as if even it understood the moment. Phones were no longer subtle. They were steady, focused, recording history. The analyst stepped back, nearly bumping into another attendee. "I told you," he breathed. "That's her." The suited man forced a laugh that didn't survive more than a second. "This is some kind of internal error," he said quickly. "She doesn't have credentials displayed." She tilted her head slightly. "Because I don't need to," she replied. The guard removed his hand from his radio entirely now. He took one full step back, then another, repositioning, no longer blocking her path. Standing beside her, the suited man noticed the shift too late. "You said I didn't belong," she said calmly, her voice cutting clean through the lobby. No volume. Just precision. "You told security to escort me out." His mouth opened. No sound followed. Across the terminal, a board member who had remained silent until now lowered his sunglasses slowly. "Is there a problem here?" he asked. No one answered. Because everyone already knew. Her phone vibrated once more. She glanced at the screen briefly, then looked back at the man in navy. "You have 30 seconds, she said evenly, to explain why the CEO of this company was denied access to her own summit." The color left his face completely this time. Around them, the executive terminal felt smaller, tighter, like the walls themselves were leaning in. 5 minutes. They were over. 30 seconds. That was generous. He didn't need 30. He needed air. The man in the navy suit blinked once, twice, as if waiting for the terminal to reset itself. As if the screen would glitch. As if her name would disappear. It didn't. Chief Executive Officer. Still glowing behind him. "This is," he began, voice tight. "This is clearly a miscommunication. A few minutes ago, he had been projecting authority. Now he was negotiating survival." She didn't interrupt. That was the worst part. She let him speak. The board member, near the glass wall, stepped forward, removing his sunglasses fully now. His voice carried weight without needing volume. "Explain the miscommunication," he said. The suited man swallowed. "Well, she arrived without credentials displayed. No visible badge. No prior notice to event staff. No visible badge. No prior notice. The excuses sounded thin even to him. She folded her hands loosely in front of her. You require badges for board members? She asked calmly. No, but for primary shareholders, that's not what I meant. The guard shifted again, this time turning fully toward her. Ma'am, he said quietly, almost apologetically, I was following the report given to me. She nodded once. I know. It wasn't blame in her voice. It was assessment. Across the terminal, someone muttered he told her she didn't belong. Another voice answered. He said support staff. The word traveled again. Support staff. The suited man heard it now from someone else's mouth. It sounded uglier that way. His composure cracked. She refused to identify herself, he said, desperation creeping in. We have security protocols.
She tilted her head slightly.
You didn't ask who I was. Silence. You told me who I wasn't. That landed harder than the title on the screen. The receptionist's eyes were still locked on the dashboard. Another notification slid across the system display. HRESCLATIONREVIEWINITED. He saw it. His jaw tightened. This doesn't require escalation, he said quickly. We can resolve this internally. Internally, quietly, before the board, before the cameras, before the story formed a spine. She stepped one pace forward now, not aggressive, not theatrical. Just enough to close the distance between them. You initiated security removal of an executive officer, she said evenly. In front of shareholders. Every word was clinical. Precise. That's not internal. The board member glanced at his tablet, reading the alert that had just come through. His expression hardened. You called for her to be escorted out? He asked the suited man. He hesitated. That half-second was everything. Yes, he admitted, barely audible. Phones lifted higher. The analyst who had whispered earlier now stood straight, no longer uncertain. The guard adjusted his stance once more. He was no longer beside her. He was behind her. Protecting, the suited man noticed. His authority had evaporated in real time. You told me I didn't belong, she said quietly. No anger. No raised voice. Just truth. And you were ready to remove me from a company I built. The terminal felt smaller again. Compressed. The board member took a slow breath. I think he said carefully we need to discuss this in the executive lounge. She didn't look away from the man in navy. No, she said. We'll discuss it right here. Public. Visible. Accountable. The crack in the room had become a fracture. Public. Tup. That was the word that made him flinch. Not termination. Not audit. Public. The suited man forced a tight smile that fooled no one. There's no need to escalate this in front of attendees, he said carefully. We were simply enforcing access standards. Access standards. The phrase slid across the marble like oil. She looked past him for a moment. Past the screen still glowing with her title. Past the cluster of executives pretending not to stare. Past the security guard now standing firmly at her back. And for a split second, the terminal dissolved. She was 16 again, standing in a hotel lobby in Charlotte. Sunday dress. Braided hair. Waiting for her parents after a leadership banquet. You can't wait here, the clerk had said. This space is for guests. She had tried to explain. She had tried to shrink. It hadn't mattered. She was escorted outside. The shame didn't fade. It calcified. Turned into ambition. Into ownership. Into this. The present snapped back into place. The jet outside gleamed under morning light. The suited man cleared his throat, unaware he was standing in the shadow of her memory. If you had just identified yourself, he continued, voice trembling slightly now, none of this would have happened. She met his eyes again. You didn't ask who I was. The words were steady, measured. You decided who I wasn't. That sentence moved through the room like electricity. Someone near the espresso bar whispered, "Oh my God." The board member folded his arms, no longer neutral. You said she didn't belong, he stated flatly. The suited man shifted his weight. I said this was an executive-only summit, and she isn't. The board member pressed. He hesitated again. That was the second crack. I didn't recognize her, he admitted finally. Recognition.
As if leadership required a uniform.
As if power had a dress code.
She took one slow step closer.
Not invading. Just clarifying distance. Let me make this simple, she said quietly. Her voice did not rise. It sharpened. You instructed security to remove me. Yes, but in front of shareholders. He said nothing. In a company where I hold controlling interest. The words didn't need volume. They needed accuracy. Another notification flashed across the system screen. HRCOMPLIANCEREVIIMMEDIATEIANTTEIADWREQEIADIUUID. Murmurs spread. The analyst who had whispered earlier now stood straighter, no longer hiding behind uncertainty. He wasn't the only one. People were recalculating, repositioning, choosing sides. The guard cleared his throat softly. Sir, he said to the suited man, tone formal now, I've been instructed to remain with the CEO. Not this individual. Nah, ma'am. The CEO. Titles matter when truth arrives. The suited man's shoulders dropped just slightly. Not surrender, but realization. 5 minutes ago, he had been certain. Certain she didn't belong. Certain he controlled the room. Now the room was watching him. And she hadn't raised her voice once. She hadn't needed to. She looked at him one final time before turning slightly toward the crowd. This isn't about a badge, she said evenly. It's about bias. The word landed heavier than anything else she'd said. And for the first time since this began, he had no protocol for that. Bias. The word didn't echo. It settled. Heavy. Precise. Unavoidable. The suited man's lips parted, but nothing coherent formed. He looked around the terminal as if searching for reinforcement, someone to laugh, someone to dismiss her claim, someone to restore the balance he had lost. No one moved, because now it wasn't about whether she belonged. It was about what he had done. The board member near the glass wall tapped his tablet, once reading the compliance alert in full. Level red review, he said quietly. That's automatic escalation. Her phone vibrated again in her hand. She glanced at it briefly. Legal is present, she said. They're listening. The suited man stiffened. Listening, she turned the screen slightly so he could see the active call interface. Muted. Connected. Executive Legal Counsel. You call compliance? He asked, disbelief creeping in. I initiated a review, she corrected calmly. For executive-level discrimination and improper security activation. Each phrase was surgical. Executive level. Discrimination. Improper activation. They weren't emotional words. They were career-ending ones. The receptionist behind the desk swallowed hard as another notification rolled across the display. CCESLOGSSAALAD. INCIDENTFOOTAGEPRESERVAD. The suited man turned sharply toward the guard. You reported this as a security breach, he accused. The guard held steady. I reported what I was told, he replied evenly. I've now received updated instructions. Which are the suited man demanded? The guard met his eyes. To defer, to the CEO. The room shifted again. Not loudly, but definitively. The analyst who had whispered earlier stepped forward, no longer uncertain. "Sir," he said to the suited man, voice careful but firm, "I heard you say she didn't belong." The suited man's head snapped toward him. "You're out of line?" "No," she said softly. "He's not." She faced the small crowd, forming a loose semicircle around them. "This is how it happens," she continued, voice steady. "Not with shouting, not with slurs, with assumptions, with certainty." Her gaze returned to the suited man. "You didn't verify my identity." "I was following protocol," he insisted weakly. "Protocol," she repeated, "is designed to protect the company." She paused. "Not protect your assumptions." That one hit. Phones were no longer hidden. They were steady, focused, documenting. The board member stepped closer now, expression firm. "You activated removal on the CEO of this company," he said flatly. "Without verification." The suited man's composure thinned further. "I didn't recognize her." "And that she replied quietly is the problem." Another vibration. This one, sharper. Her screen lit up with a new message from compliance HRDIREC TORNOTIFIAD EMERGENCYREVIEW PANLAS SEMBLAD. She lifted her eyes to him again. "You had 5 minutes," she said calmly. "And you used them to prove my point." Silence stretched. The jet outside glinted in the sunlight. Inside the terminal, careers were beginning to fracture. And she still hadn't raised her voice. The room had already shifted. Now it tilted. The suited man looked smaller than he had 5 minutes ago. Not physically, structurally. Like the architecture of his certainty had collapsed from the inside. "This doesn't have to destroy anyone's career," he said, carefully, tone softening into negotiation. "We can resolve this privately." Privately. Again.
She studied him for a long second.
Then she shook her head just once. "No," she said. The word wasn't loud, but it ended the conversation he thought he was having. "You told me I didn't belong," she continued, voice level. "In front of employees. In front of shareholders. You initiated removal." He swallowed. "You didn't identify yourself." She stepped forward, closing the last comfortable inch of space between them. "I shouldn't have to." Silence. Phones steady. Breathing audible. "You said this summit was for executives," she went on, each word placed deliberately. "You said support staff wait outside?" A murmur rippled again through the terminal. Support staff. Hearing it repeated now made it heavier. The board member crossed his arms. "Did you say that?" he asked bluntly. The suited man hesitated. That hesitation was the confession. He began. "Yes," she said quietly. "You did. Her phone vibrated once more. She glanced down, then looked back up at him. "This summit," she said, voice cutting clean through the marble and glass, "exists because I built it. Not inherited. Not appointed. Built. I negotiated the acquisitions that fund this division. I approved the jet sitting outside. I signed off on the leadership roster you were so eager to defend." Every sentence tightened the air. "And you told me to wait outside." The suited man's face drained completely now. Someone near the reception desk whispered, "Oh my God," she didn't look at them. She looked only at him. "You mistook appearance for authority," she said evenly. "You mistook silence for permission." Another notification flashed across the main screen. HRDIREC TORSUSPENDEBPND EINGIAND ADANAESTTION. A collective intake of breath. The board member checked his tablet again. It's official, he said quietly. The suited man's shoulders sagged. Wait, he tried. But she had already turned, slightly addressing the room. For everyone watching, she said calmly, this is what bias looks like at the executive level. No shouting, no rage, just clarity. She turned back to him one final time. You don't get to decide who belongs, she said. In a company I own. And for the first time since this began, he had nothing left to say. The notification didn't blink. It stayed. HRDIRECTORSUSPENDIENDIESTIGATION. The words hovered above the reception desk like a verdict carved in light. No one spoke. Not at first. The suited man stared at the screen as if reading it long enough would change it. As if suspension were a typo. As if pending investigation meant temporary inconvenience instead of professional freefall. It's automatic, he muttered weakly. Level red triggers oversight. Yes, she replied calmly. And oversight triggers accountability. His phone buzzed violently in his hand. He looked down. Another alert. ACCESEEIEEILAGE. His executive badge, clipped neatly to his blazer, emitted a soft red pulse. One blink. Two. Then solid red, the color of denial. The guard noticed it before he did. Sir, the guard said, voice formal again, your access has been restricted pending review. Pending review. The phrase sounded different now. He looked down at his badge like it had betrayed him. This is a mistake, he insisted, turning toward the board member. You know me. I've led 3 summits without incident. The board member didn't move. This, he said evenly, is an incident. A murmur swept through the executives gathered near the espresso bar. Some lowered their phones now, not because the moment was over, but because it had already crystallized. The analyst stepped back slowly, processing what he had just witnessed. Power shifting in real time, without yelling, without spectacle. Just consequence. The suited man's composure finally fractured. She walked in without identification, he said, voice tightening. No badge. No clearance. She regarded him with steady calm. You assumed clearance has a uniform, she said. You assumed authority has a look? Another notification rolled across the display. EXACUTIVAREVIEIEWPANELCONVENANGIMADIAATAA. The board member's tablet chimed in sync. He exhaled once. It's out of our hands now, he said. No. It had never been in theirs. The suited man looked at her, desperation flashing briefly across his face. You're going to ruin my career over a misunderstanding, she held his gaze. You attempted to remove the CEO of this company from her own summit, she said evenly. In front of witnesses. A pause. You ruined your career. The red badge light blinked again. Final. The guard stepped slightly closer, not to her. To him, not forceful, but directive. Sir, the guard said quietly, I'm going to need you to step away from the executive access point. 5 minutes ago, that sentence belonged to him. Now it belonged to consequence. She didn't smile.
She didn't celebrate.
She simply watched the system do what it was designed to do when someone finally activated it. The collapse wasn't loud. It was administrative and irreversible. He didn't argue when the guard stepped closer. He couldn't, because the authority he'd been standing on had already dissolved beneath him. Sir, the guard repeated quietly, not aggressive, just procedural, please step away from the executive terminal. 5 minutes ago, that sentence was meant for her. Now it belonged to him. The suited man glanced around the lobby, searching for an ally.
Someone to soften this.
someone to reinterpret what had just happened. He found none. The executives who had watched in silence were no longer neutral observers. They were witnesses, and witnesses change outcomes. He unclipped his badge slowly. The red light remained solid. Final. He placed it on the reception counter with a soft click that echoed louder than it should have. "I've given 10 years to this company," he said, voice tight. She looked at him steadily. "And I've given 20, she replied. The words weren't competitive. They were contextual. He had given service. She had built the structure. Another notification rolled across the system display, INTERIMHRLA, ADAPPOINTED. FULANVESTIGATIONTOFOLOW. Administrative language. Clean. Cold. Cold. Permanent. The board member stepped back slightly, already drafting a message on his tablet. Damage control would begin soon. Statements would be crafted. Policies reviewed. Committees assembled. But none of that changed what had already unfolded. The room had seen it. The assumption. The command. The attempt to remove her. She stepped forward, not toward him, but toward the gathered executives. No microphone. No stage. Just presence. "This isn't about humiliation," she said calmly. "It's about correction." Her eyes moved across the lobby faces she had hired, mentored, promoted. "Bias doesn't announce itself," she continued. "It hides inside certainty, inside quick judgments, inside the phrase, 'you don't belong.'" No one interrupted, because they had all heard it. She turned slightly toward the glass wall where the jet waited. "I didn't raise my voice," she said evenly. "I raised the standard." Silence followed. Not awkward. Not uncertain. Resolved. The guard stepped aside, clearing the path to the executive access gate. No one blocked her now. No one questioned her presence. As she walked forward, the automatic doors parted smoothly. This time, no one told her to wait outside. Behind her, careers were recalculating. Policies would be rewritten. And somewhere in the memory of everyone who had watched, a new definition of leadership had just been set. The executive doors sealed softly behind her. No applause. No chaos. Just a controlled shift in gravity. Inside the private lounge beyond the terminal, floor-to-ceiling windows framed the jet, waiting on standby. The hum of the runway felt distant, now muted by soundproof glass and corporate insulation. Her phone vibrated again. Legal. Compliance? Board. All active. All footage secured, her general counsel said through the speaker. Security transcripts archived. HR director access suspended company-wide. Good, she replied calmly. Press, the voice asked. She paused. Outside, the glass executives still lingered near the terminal entrance, replaying what they had witnessed in their minds. "Not yet," she said. "Internal first. Always internal first." She stepped toward the conference table at the center of the lounge. 12 leather chairs. Polished walnut surface. The summit agenda still glowing on the wall display. Acquisition strategy. Market expansion. Leadership pipeline. Leadership. Shh.
She allowed herself one slow breath.
20 years ago, she was asked to leave a room she had earned the right to sit in. Today, she owned the building and still had to prove she belonged. That was the pattern. That was the problem. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a message from the interim HR-led full bias audit initiated. Mandatory executive retraining to follow. Retraining. She considered the word. Policy could be rewritten. Training modules redesigned. But culture required confrontation. There was a soft knock at the lounge door. The board member stepped in, expression measured. I wanted to say he began carefully, that was handled with restraint. She met his gaze. It shouldn't require restraint to enter a room I built, she replied. He nodded slowly. No, he admitted. It shouldn't. Outside the glass, the suited man was being escorted, not dragged, not humiliated, but directed toward the side exit. The same doors he had pointed her toward. The symmetry wasn't lost on anyone. She didn't watch long. Instead, she turned back to the display screen and tapped once. The summit agenda, refreshed. Opening remarks, CEO address. She straightened her hoodie slightly, then removed it, revealing the tailored blouse beneath. Not to prove anything, just because it was time. Notify the room, she said into her phone. We're starting on schedule. The executive doors unlocked again. This time when she stepped forward, no one questioned where she belonged. The executive conference room was already full when she entered. 12 seats. 12 faces. All standing. Not out of ceremony. Out of recalibration. No one had expected the morning to begin like this. They had come prepared for projections, mergers, quarterly forecasts. Instead, they had witnessed a test. And failed it. She walked to the head of the table without hesitation. No one blocked her path. No one questioned her access. The chair at the center remained slightly pulled back, waiting. She didn't sit immediately. She let the silence settle first. Let them feel it. Good morning, she said evenly. The room responded in unison, softer than usual. Good morning. The board member who had stepped in earlier took his seat slowly, tablet resting untouched in front of him. Across the table, the head of strategy cleared his throat. We were informed there was an incident.
She nodded once.
There was no embellishment, no drama. Just fact. The incident has been escalated, she continued. HR leadership is suspended pending investigation. Compliance has secured all records. A few glances exchanged across the table, some surprised, some relieved, one or two uncomfortable. This isn't about punishment, she added. It's about exposure. She moved her gaze deliberately from one executive to the next. If bias can reach the CEO, she said calmly, it can reach anyone. That landed heavier than any accusation. The head of operations shifted slightly in his chair. Do you believe this is systemic? He asked carefully. She didn't hesitate. I believe, she replied, that certainty without verification is systemic.
Silence again.
No one argued. No one dismissed. They had seen it unfold in real time. I arrived dressed casually, she continued. That was intentional.
A few eyebrows lifted.
I wanted to see how leadership responds to ambiguity.
Her eyes sharpened slightly.
Now we know. The jet outside the window reflected morning sunlight into the room. The company's logo glinted across the polished table. She finally took her seat. Not triumphantly. Naturally. Let's begin, she said, tapping the agenda screen. This summit is about expansion. A pause. But expansion requires standards. No one missed the message. Because this time, they all knew exactly who belonged at the head of the table. The summit moved forward.
Slides advanced.
Metrics displayed. Projections debated. But something had shifted beneath the numbers. It wasn't tension anymore. It was awareness. When she spoke about global expansion, they listened differently. When she outlined acquisition strategy, no one interrupted. When she paused, no one rushed to fill the silence. Respect hadn't been requested. It had been recalibrated. Midway through the agenda, she closed the presentation deck. There's one more item, she said. The screen behind her went dark. No charts. No graphs. Just her reflection faintly mirrored in the glass. This morning, she continued, voice steady, was not about a badge. No one disagreed. It was about perception. And perception at this level becomes policy.
She let that settle.
If leadership can misjudge who belongs in an executive terminal, we have a cultural flaw, not a procedural one. The head of strategy nodded slowly. The board member folded his hands. We will address it, he said. She met his gaze. We will correct it. Not soften. Not reframe. Correct. Outside the window, the jet engines powered up softly, a low mechanical hum vibrating through the glass. Momentum. Movement. Forward. She stood once more, not because she needed height, but because the moment required clarity. I didn't walk into that terminal to be recognized, she said. I walked in to measure the room. A few executives shifted, absorbing that. Leadership, she added, isn't proven by who we let in. Her eyes moved across the table one final time. It's proven by who we try to keep out. Silence followed. Not heavy. Resolve. She reached for her blazer draped over the back of her chair and slipped it on with unhurried ease. Prepare the diversity audit framework, she instructed. Mandatory for all executive divisions. Yes, ma'am, someone replied. She didn't correct the title. She didn't need to. As the meeting adjourned and the executives began to file out, no one questioned her presence. No one pointed. No one suggested she wait outside. Because now they understood what belonging actually looked like. It wasn't about access. It was about authority earned, built, and exercised without raising a voice. And she had just set the standard.